She's crashing. Get the crash cart. Now. The word shattered the silence of the private NICU suite, like glass exploding across marble floors. Victoria Ashford's scream followed immediately after, raw and primal, the kind of sound that comes from a mother watching death reach for her child. No. Do something. Marcus. Marcus Ashford. The Marcus Ashford, whose face graced Forbes covers, whose tech empire was worth $43 billion, whose signature could move markets, stood frozen. Completely, utterly powerless. Before we go further, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Are you team money solves everything, or team some things are priceless? Because what happens next will change everything you believe. 48 hours earlier, life was perfect. Victoria had given birth to their first child, a daughter, Isabel Grace Ashford, in the most exclusive private maternity ward in Manhattan. The suite cost $60,000 a night. The champagne was vintage Dom Perignon. The flowers covering every surface were flown in from Ecuador. Marcus had bought out Tiffany's entire top floor to shower Victoria with push presents, a pink diamond necklace, a limited edition Patek Philippe watch, a Rolls-Royce Cullinan with the baby's initials embroidered in the headrests. She's perfect, Victoria had whispered, tears streaming down her face as she held Isabel for the first time. Look at her, Marcus. We made something perfect. Marcus, a man who'd built empires but never believed in God, found himself praying. Thank you, he'd murmured to whoever might be listening. Thank you for this miracle. But miracles, they would learn, can shatter faster than crystal. It started so small. A cough. Just one tiny cough from Isabel during her first feeding. The private nurse, hired for $3,000 a day, noted it in the chart but wasn't concerned. Newborns cough sometimes. Nothing unusual. By hour 6, Isabel's breathing sounded different. Faster. Shallower. Her tiny chest rose and fell with effort that seemed too hard for someone so new to the world. Something's wrong, Victoria insisted, that mother's intuition screaming alarm bells in her chest. Her breathing, it's not right. The nurse checked vitals. Everything appeared normal. First time mother knows, she assured Victoria with a patronizing smile that would haunt her later. Perfectly natural to worry. But Victoria Ashford hadn't clawed her way from a middle-class upbringing in Ohio to Manhattan's social elite by ignoring her instincts. Get the doctor. Now. Dr. Raymond Chen, chief of neonatology, arrived within minutes. One look at Isabel and his expression shifted from confident to concerned. He listened to her lungs, examined her color, checked her oxygen saturation. Let's run some tests, he said, his voice carefully neutral in that way doctors have when they're worried but don't want to panic parents. Probably just some fluid in her lungs from delivery. Very common. We'll have her sorted out in no time. Marcus nodded, already pulling out his phone. Whatever you need. Best equipment. Best specialists. Money is no object. Money is no object. He'd said those words 1,000 times in his life. They'd always worked before. The tests came back inconclusive. Isabel's oxygen levels were dropping despite supplementation. Her breathing grew more labored. By hour 18, she was in respiratory distress. Dr. Chen called in Dr. Patricia Morrison, a renowned pediatric pulmonologist from Boston. She arrived via private jet. Marcus paid $50,000 for the emergency consultation. Dr. Morrison ran different tests, ordered different scans, tried different theories. Nothing. I don't understand, she admitted, something doctors hate to say. Her lungs look clear. No infection markers. No structural abnormalities. But she's deteriorating. Victoria hadn't left Isabel's side. Hadn't slept. Hadn't eaten. She just sat there, one finger hooked through the incubator's port, touching her daughter's impossibly small hand. Marcus, she whispered, her voice cracking. I can't lose her. I can't. You won't, Marcus interrupted, though his voice lacked conviction. I'll get more doctors. The best in the world. I'll. Mr. Ashford, Dr. Chen interrupted gently. We've already contacted. I don't care who you contacted. Marcus exploded, his control finally shattering. I'm worth $43 billion. Someone, somewhere, knows what's wrong with my daughter. And so began the parade. Dr. Michael Jong from Johns Hopkins, Dr. Sarah Connor from Mayo Clinic, Dr. Raj Patel from UCLA. They arrived from across the country, across oceans, 15 of the world's most brilliant medical minds, each commanding fees that could buy houses, genetic specialists, immunologists, infectious disease experts, toxicologists. Day 2, still no diagnosis. Isabel's breathing worsened. Day 3, more tests, more theories, each one ruled out. Victoria stopped speaking entirely, her voice stolen by terror. Day 4, Dr. Chen gathered all 15 specialists in a conference room. The arguing was fierce, desperate. Rare metabolic disorders, undetected birth defects, unknown pathogens. Each expert defended their hypothesis with decades of experience and ego. Meanwhile, Isabel's monitors screamed warnings that everyone was running out of time. Day 5, Marcus stood in the hallway at 3 a.m., phone pressed his ear, begging a Nobel Prize-winning geneticist to fly from Stockholm. "Name your price," he pleaded. "Please. She's dying and no one can tell me why." That's when he heard it. Heard Victoria scream. Heard the crash cart. Heard his entire world collapsing. He ran. The room was chaos. Machines shrieking. Doctors shouting. His wife sobbing. And in the center of it all, his daughter, barely 3 days old, fighting for breath while 15 of the world's best doctors stood helpless. Dr. Chen worked frantically, adjusting oxygen levels, administering medications. Nothing helped. "We're losing her," someone said. Marcus felt his knees buckle. $43 billion. And he couldn't save the only thing that mattered. Victoria's eyes met his across the room. In them, he saw the question that would haunt him forever. What good is all your money now? What happens next will shock you. Because the answer didn't come from inside that room of experts. It came from someone no one was listening to. Someone no one even saw. Keep watching. The antiseptic smell of hospital corridors mixed with the aroma of home-cooked food, an incongruous combination that somehow made sense outside Manhattan Presbyterian's main entrance. Jerk chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese. Hot plates, $15. Diane Williams' voice carried across the sidewalk as she served another exhausted family who'd spent their last dollars on parking. Beside her, 17-year-old Keisha Williams packaged meals with practiced efficiency, making change, offering napkins, reading the devastation in every customer's face. Quick question, have you ever been overlooked? Ever had the answer but nobody would listen? Drop a comment because Keisha's about to show us what happens when you refuse to stay invisible. This was their spot, their hustle, their survival. Every evening after Diane finished her day shift cleaning offices, she'd cook for hours in their cramped apartment, and she and Keisha would sell plates until midnight. It kept the lights on, kept Keisha's younger brothers fed, kept them from drowning after Keisha's father died 2 years ago, leaving nothing but medical debt and memories. Keisha had dreams once. Scholarship potential. Science fair awards. Teachers who said she could be anything. But dreams don't pay rent. Dreams don't feed hungry siblings. So Keisha dropped out at 16, picked up the street corner, and learned to become invisible. Invisible to the wealthy families rushing past. Invisible to the doctors in their pristine white coats. Invisible to everyone except those who needed a hot meal and couldn't afford the hospital cafeteria's prices. But invisible doesn't mean blind. Keisha noticed everything. She noticed patterns. The same families returning night after night, hope dying in their eyes by degrees. The nurses who'd sneak out for cigarettes, discussing cases they shouldn't. The snippets of medical jargon floating through automatic doors. For 5 days, she'd watched a different kind of desperate. Black SUVs with tinted windows. Men in expensive suits barking orders into phones. Security guards multiplying around the NICU wing. And she'd overheard the whispers, the Ashford baby. 15 specialists. Nobody knows what's wrong. It was Wednesday evening, day 5 of Isabel's crisis, when Keisha overheard something that made her freeze mid-motion, a plate of food suspended in her hands. 2 NICU nurses stood 10 feet away, smoking, their voices carrying in the cold December air. "It's heartbreaking," the younger one said. "That baby's dying and nobody can figure out why." 15 doctors. 15. "I know," the older nurse replied, taking a long drag. Dr. Chen looks like he's aged 10 years. And the mother, God, I've never seen someone so destroyed. There's something weird, though. The younger nurse lowered her voice, but not enough. I've been in that room every shift. The baby's breathing pattern, it changes. Changes how? Every time the humidifier cycles off, her breathing gets worse. Then when it kicks back on, she stabilizes slightly. It's subtle, but I've noticed it 3 times now. Did you tell someone? I mentioned it to Dr. Morrison, but she said I was seeing patterns that weren't there, that the baby's overall decline doesn't correlate with a humidifier cycle. And I mean, she's a specialist, right? What do I know? They finished their cigarettes and went back inside. Keisha stood motionless, her mind racing. The humidifier. Something about that detail. It nagged at her, pulling at threads of memory. She barely noticed her mother asking if she was okay. Barely heard the customers requesting sweet tea. Her mind had traveled back 2 years, to when her baby brother Donnell was 6 months old. Donnell had developed mysterious breathing problems. The free clinic doctors were stumped. Diane couldn't afford specialists. But Diane, who'd cleaned enough hospital rooms to pick up medical knowledge through osmosis, had methodically eliminated variables, changed his formula, washed his clothes differently. And finally, she'd realized the humidifier they bought secondhand was making him sick. Not the humidifier itself. The water. Someone had added an essential oil blend to the reservoir, and Donnell was having severe reaction. Once they switched to distilled water only, he recovered in days. Keisha's heart began to pound. What if? No, it was crazy. 15 world-renowned doctors wouldn't miss something that simple. She was a high school dropout selling food on a street corner. Who was she to think she knew something they didn't? But the nurse's words echoed. Her breathing pattern changes every time the humidifier cycles off. Keisha tried to focus on work. Served another 20 customers. Counted money. Packed up supplies. But that night, lying on the couch in their apartment while her brothers slept, she couldn't stop thinking about it. By morning, she'd made up her mind. She had to at least try. Mama, she said over breakfast, I need to do something today. Something that might get us in trouble. Diane looked up from stirring grits, concern creasing her face. What kind of trouble? Keisha explained everything. The Ashford baby, the nurse's conversation, her theory about the humidifier, the impossibility of getting anyone to listen to a girl like her. Baby, you could get arrested, Diane said slowly. Security up there is tight. And even if you get in, they're not going to listen. You know how it is. I know. Keisha's voice was quiet but steady. But, Mama, what if I'm right? What if that baby dies because nobody would listen to the girl selling food outside? Diane was silent for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took her daughter's hands. Your daddy always said you had a gift. Said you saw things other people missed. Her eyes filled with tears. He'd be so proud of you. I'm proud of you. You do what you have to do. That afternoon, Keisha approached the hospital with her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She borrowed a volunteer vest from the donation bin. Too big, but it would do. She waited until shift change at 3 p.m., when security was most distracted. She slipped through the doors. The NICU was on the 4th floor. Each step felt like walking toward a cliff edge. Any second, someone would stop her, question her, call security. She kept her head down, moved with purpose like she belonged there. The corridor outside the NICU was lined with security. She couldn't get through the front. But Keisha had spent 2 years studying this hospital from the outside. She knew things the wealthy families didn't, like the supply entrance around the corner that nurses use for quick access. She waited until a nurse emerged carrying empty equipment, caught the door before it closed, slipped inside. The NICU was hushed, full of soft beeping and the whisper of ventilators. She could see the private suite at the end, the lights brighter, the activity more intense. That had to be it. Every instinct screamed at her to run. She didn't belong here. This was crazy, insane. She was going to get arrested and her family would lose everything. And then she heard it, a woman's broken sobbing, raw and desperate. Keisha moved forward. The door to the private suite was partially open. She could see a woman, Victoria Ashford, though Keisha didn't know her name then, sitting beside an incubator, her head in her hands. Inside the incubator, a tiny baby struggled for breath. Monitors beeped warnings. And beside the incubator, humming softly, was a medical-grade humidifier. Keisha's nursing theory crystallized into certainty. She took a breath and stepped into the room. She said quietly, "I think something in the humidifier might be hurting your baby." Everything is about to explode. Because what Keisha doesn't know is that she just walked into a room full of the world's most powerful people, and they're about to learn that power means nothing without truth. "Don't go anywhere." The room erupted. "Security!" Marcus Ashford's roar filled the space like thunder. Victoria's head snapped up, confusion and grief distorting her face. And before Keisha could take another breath, 2 security guards materialized behind her, grabbing her arms with bruising force. "Wait!" Keisha gasped, but they were already dragging her backward. "How did this girl get in here?" Marcus advanced on her, his face twisted with rage and exhaustion. "Who the hell are you? This is a private." "Sir, we'll remove her immediately," one guard said, pulling Keisha toward the door. "No, please." Keisha struggled, her voice rising in desperation. "The humidifier. Something's wrong with the humidifier." "Oh my God," Victoria whispered, standing on shaking legs. "Is she, Marcus, is she a reporter? Did she sneak into?" "I'm not a reporter." Keisha's voice cracked. I heard the nurses talking, and my brother had something similar, and nobody's checking the humidifier." "Drop a comment right now. Do you think they'll listen or throw her out? Because what happens in the next 60 seconds will determine if a baby lives or dies." "Enough!" Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, his voice sharp with authority. "What is going on here?" "This girl broke into our daughter's room," Marcus snarled. "Call the police. I want her arrested for trespassing, for the humidifier." Keisha shouted over him, tears streaming down her face now. "Please, just listen." A nurse said the baby's breathing changes when the humidifier cycles off. "My little brother had allergies. My mama figured out that additives in the water can poison babies. What if there's something in the water reservoir? Something you're not testing for?" The room fell silent. Dr. Chen stared at her, his exhausted brain trying to process what she'd said. Behind him, 3 of the specialist doctors had gathered, their faces showing everything from outrage to curiosity. "That's absurd," Dr. Patricia Morrison said coldly. "We use medical-grade distilled water. The humidifier is standard equipment. Every NICU patient has one. If there was contamination, we'd have a hospital-wide crisis." "Unless it's batch-specific," Dr. Raj Patel said slowly, stepping forward. "When did we last change the water supply?" Dr. Chen's eyes widened. "Day 1. We installed fresh equipment for the Ashford's arrival. Premium everything, including a new shipment of—" He stopped. "Oh my God! You can't be seriously considering this," Dr. Morrison protested. "She's a random girl off the street. We have 15 specialists here who'll be missing something," Dr. Chen interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. He looked at Keisha, really looked at her for the first time. "What's your name?" "Keisha Williams." "So, Keisha, when your brother was sick, what was in the water?" "Someone had put essential oils in it," Keisha said, her words tumbling out fast. "Lavender and eucalyptus. My mama said the oil particles were too small to filter out, and they were coating his lungs, making him allergic to his own breathing. Is that possible here?" Dr. Chen turned to his team. "Get me the water reservoir from that humidifier. Now. And I want a full analysis, bacterial culture, chemical composition, everything." "Raymond, this is ridiculous," Dr. Morrison said. "You're going to derail our entire diagnostic process because some girl who noticed a pattern that we missed," Dr. Chen snapped. "A pattern that correlates with a baby's breathing cycles. How many times did you personally observe those cycles, Patricia?" Dr. Morrison fell silent. "That's what I thought." Dr. Chen turned to the nurses. "Pull the reservoir. Rush it to the lab. I want results in 20 minutes, not 2 hours. And check what supplier provided that water batch." The room exploded into activity. Two nurses carefully disconnected the humidifier. A lab technician appeared, running with a water sample. Security still held Keisha, unsure whether to remove her or not. Marcus stood frozen, his anger transforming into something else. Hope? Doubt? He looked at this girl, really looked at her. Saw the volunteer vest that didn't fit. Saw the worn sneakers and the food stains on her jeans. Saw the intelligence burning in her eyes despite the tears on her cheeks. "Let her go," he said quietly to security. They released her. Keisha stumbled, catching herself on the wall. Victoria approached slowly, as if in a dream. "How did you know?" she whispered. "How did you? Everyone else missed it. Everyone." "I didn't know," Keisha admitted. I heard the nurses talking, and it reminded me of my brother. And I thought if I was wrong, okay, I'd get in trouble. But if I was right and didn't say anything," her voice broke. "I couldn't live with that." "What's your brother's name?" Victoria asked softly. "Darnell. He's 7 now. He's okay." Victoria reached out and took Keisha's hand. The gesture was so unexpected that Keisha nearly pulled away. But Victoria held on, this wealthy woman in designer clothes clutching the hand of a girl who sold food on street corners. "Thank you for being brave enough to speak," Victoria whispered. The moments ticked by like hours. Keisha stood there, hand in Victoria's, while Marcus paced like a caged animal. The specialists muttered among themselves, some skeptical, others intrigued. Dr. Chen stood by the phone, waiting. Then it rang. Everyone froze. Dr. Chen answered, listened, and the color drained from his face. "You're certain?" Pause. Tested again. Longer pause. "Dear God." He hung up and turned to the room. His hands were shaking. "The water is contaminated," he said, his voice barely audible. "It's Burkholderia pseudomali, a rare bacterial pathogen, extremely uncommon in the United States. It produces toxins that mimic multiple other conditions, which is why our tests kept giving us conflicting data. The bacteria colonized in the humidifier reservoir and has been aerosolizing with every cycle, and Isabel has been breathing it in for 5 days straight." The silence was deafening. "Oh my God," someone whispered. Dr. Morrison sank into a chair, her face gray. "We never tested for that. It's not in any standard panel. The odds of finding it in a U.S. hospital are apparently not impossible," Dr. Patel said quietly. Dr. Chen was already moving. "Get me meropenem and TMPSMX. Now. We need to start aggressive antibiotic therapy immediately. And I want every humidifier in this hospital shut down until we identify the contaminated batch." Nurses rushed to comply. Within minutes, Isabel had new 4 lines running with antibiotics specifically targeting the bacteria that had been slowly killing her. Marcus turned to Keisha, and she saw something she never expected to see on a billionaire's face. Tears. "You saved her," he said, his voice breaking. 15 of the world's best doctors, and you, he couldn't finish. "Sir, I didn't." "Yes, you did." He took a shaky breath. "What's your name?" "Your full name." "Keisha Williams." "Keisha Williams," Marcus repeated, as if committing it to memory. "I will never forget that name. Never." Dr. Chen approached Keisha, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen from a doctor before. Respect. "How old are you?" 17. "Are you in school?" Keisha looked down. "No, sir. I had to drop out last year. My family we needed the money." Dr. Chen nodded slowly. Then he looked at the other specialists, at these brilliant minds who'd been humbled by a teenage girl with no credentials, no degrees, just observation and courage. "We almost killed this baby," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "We were so confident in our expertise, so sure that the answer had to be complex, that we missed a simple truth right in front of us. And this young woman," he gestured to Keisha, "she saved a life today, not because she had fancy degrees, because she paid attention, because she was brave enough to speak up when she knew she'd be dismissed." The monitor beside Isabel's incubator began to change. Her oxygen saturation was rising. Her breathing, for the first time in 5 days, began to ease. Victoria let out a sob and pressed her face against the incubator. "She's responding." "Oh, God, Marcus," she's responding. The room erupted in controlled chaos as doctors checked vitals, adjusted dosages, monitored every change. But Keisha barely noticed. She stood there, shaking, the enormity of what had just happened crashing over her. She'd walked into a billionaire's private room. She'd challenged 15 of the world's best doctors. She'd risked arrest, humiliation, her family's livelihood, and she'd saved a life. What happens next will shock you even more. Because Keisha's about to learn that speaking truth to power has consequences, both good and terrifying. Stay tuned for the conclusion. 24 hours after the antibiotics began, Isabel Grace Ashford opened her eyes. Not the blank, unseeing stare of a critically ill infant, but actual awareness. Her tiny fingers curled. Her breathing steadied into the soft, rhythmic pattern that every parent prays to hear. The monitors that had screamed warnings for 6 days finally sang a different song. Recovery. Victoria hadn't left the incubator. She stood there, one hand pressed against the glass, watching her daughter fight her way back from the edge of death. Tears carved rivers down her face, but these were different tears. These were the kind that wash away nightmare and leave hope in their wake. "She's going to make it," Dr. Chen said softly, reviewing the latest blood work. "The bacterial load is dropping. Her lungs are clearing. She's going to make it." Marcus stood behind Victoria, his hands on her shoulders, and for the first time in a week, he allowed himself to believe it. But someone was missing. Keisha had slipped out during the chaos of treatment, disappearing as quietly as she'd arrived. Security had taken her information, name, address, a statement about how she'd accessed the NICU, and she'd left before anyone could decide whether to prosecute or praise her. She'd gone back to the corner outside the hospital, back to selling food with her mother, back to being invisible. Except she wasn't invisible anymore. Find her, Marcus told his head of security at 7 a.m. the next morning. Find Keisha Williams. Bring her to me. And make it clear she's not in trouble. Make it very clear. By noon, a black SUV pulled up to Keisha's apartment building in the Bronx. Keisha's mother opened the door to find 2 men in expensive suits and nearly had a heart attack. "Mrs. Williams? We're here on behalf of Marcus Ashford. He'd like to speak with your daughter. We can drive you both to the hospital, or Mr. Ashford can come here if you prefer." Diane's hand went to her throat. Is Keisha in trouble?" Because she was trying to help. She didn't mean to. Your daughter saved Mr. Ashford's baby's life. He wants to thank her personally." 30 minutes later, Diane and Keisha sat in the back of the SUV, holding hands, both terrified for entirely different reasons than they'd expected. The meeting took place in a private conference room, not the NICU. Marcus and Victoria sat on one side of a mahogany table. Keisha and Diane sat on the other, the class dividers visible as a wall between them. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Marcus did something Keisha never expected. He stood up, walked around the table, and knelt in front of her. "I almost had you arrested," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I almost threw you out. I almost silenced the one voice that could save my daughter because I was too arrogant to listen." He paused, struggling with words. "I'm sorry, and thank you. Those words aren't enough, but they're all I have." Keisha's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to apologize, Mr. Ashford. I broke the rules. I shouldn't have." "You broke the rules because the rules were wrong," Victoria interrupted, her voice fierce. "You broke the rules because following them meant letting my baby die. You broke the rules because you're brave and brilliant, and you saw what 15 specialists couldn't see." She reached across the table and took a thick envelope, sliding it toward Keisha. "This is a check for $500,000. We want you to—" "No." Keisha pushed the envelope back, her hands shaking. "No, I can't take that. I didn't do it for money." The room went silent. Marcus stared at her. In his world, everyone had a price. Everyone wanted something. The concept of someone refusing $500,000 was incomprehensible. "Keisha," he said slowly, "you saved my daughter's life. You could ask for anything. Anything. And you're saying no." "I'm saying I didn't do it for a reward," Keisha said quietly. "I did it because it was the right thing to do. Because staying silent when I could help would have been wrong. My daddy taught me that before he died." Her voice cracked. He said our worth isn't in what we own. It's in who we help. Victoria began to cry. Not the desperate sobs of the NICU, but something deeper, the tears of someone whose entire worldview was shattering and reforming. Your father was a wise man, she whispered. He was a janitor, Keisha said, not with shame but with pride. He cleaned offices in Manhattan. Never made more than $30,000 a year. But he was the richest man I knew. The words hung in the air like a benediction. Marcus sat back down, his hands clasped together. Keisha, I can't force you to accept money, but I can't do nothing. My daughter is alive because of you. Please, let me help your family somehow. College tuition, medical care, a better apartment. Keisha looked at her mother, saw the hope warring with pride in Diane's eyes. I want to finish high school, Keisha said finally, and I want to study medicine. Not for the money, because what happened in that NICU, it showed me that the medical world needs people who see differently, people who question, people who listen to voices that get ignored. Done, Marcus said immediately. Full scholarship. High school, college, medical school, all of it. And, he paused, I want to start a foundation. The Isabel Grace Foundation. For students like you, brilliant minds from communities that get overlooked. Students who have the answers but never get asked the questions. Keisha's breath caught. Mr. Ashford, I'm serious, and I want you to help run it. Part-time, while you study. Paid position, because you understand something I'm just learning. Wisdom doesn't come with a price tag. Over the next weeks, the story spread. Not because Marcus wanted publicity. He tried to keep it quiet. But Dr. Chen published a medical journal article about cognitive bias in diagnostic medicine, using Isabel's case as a cautionary tale. The contaminated water batch was traced to a supplier who'd cut corners, leading to criminal charges. 3 other hospitals discovered they'd received water from the same batch, and found 2 more infants who'd been misdiagnosed, now receiving proper treatment because of Keisha's discovery. The media got hold of it. Teenage girl saves billionaire's baby after 15 doctors failed. The headlines wrote themselves. Keisha's life transformed overnight. Interview requests. College scouts. People recognizing her on the street. It was overwhelming and terrifying and nothing she'd ever wanted. But every time she thought about running from it all, she remembered Victoria's words. You saw what 15 specialists couldn't see. Because it wasn't just about saving one baby. It was about proving that brilliance lives in unexpected places. That poverty doesn't mean powerless. That sometimes the most important voice in the room is the one nobody's listening to. But here's what nobody knows yet, and this is where it gets really interesting. Because Keisha's about to make a choice that will change not just a life, but the entire medical establishment. You need to see what happens next. 6 months later, Keisha Williams stood in front of a classroom at Columbia University's pre-med summer program, her hand shaking slightly as she faced 60 teenagers who looked just like her, brilliant, hungry, and usually invisible. My name is Keisha, she began. 6 months ago, I was selling food outside a hospital. Today, I'm standing here because I refuse to be silent. And that's what I want to talk to you about, the power of your voice, even when the world tells you it doesn't matter. She told them Isabel's story, told them about walking into that NICU knowing she'd probably be arrested, told them about 15 world-class doctors who missed what she saw because they'd been trained to ignore voices like hers. The medical world is changing, she said, her voice growing stronger. Because of what happened, hospitals are implementing new protocols. They are training doctors to listen to nurses, to patients, to families, to anyone who might see something they are missing. They are calling it the Williams Protocol. A ripple of amazed whispers went through the room. But that's not enough, Keisha continued. Because the real problem isn't just that doctors didn't listen to me. It's that people like us, people from neighborhoods like ours, we're taught from birth that our voices don't matter, that we should stay in our lane, that brilliance belongs to other people. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. Your observations matter. Your questions matter. Your voice matters. And the world needs what you see. In the back of the room, Victoria Ashford stood holding 8-month-old Isabel, who was healthy, thriving, and completely unaware that she was the reason this program existed. Beside Victoria stood Marcus, who'd learned that his greatest investment wasn't in tech companies or real estate. It was in this room full of kids who'd been told they didn't belong in medicine. The Isabel Grace Foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations. 50 students in this first cohort. Plans for programs in 10 cities by next year. Partnerships with medical schools committed to diversifying their student bodies not just demographically, but cognitively, bringing in minds that thought differently, questioned differently, saw differently. Dr. Chen, now the Foundation's medical director, had taken a leave from the hospital to focus on this full-time. Keisha didn't just save one baby, he told a reporter. She saved me. She reminded me why I became a doctor, not to be right, but to heal. And sometimes healing means admitting you don't have all the answers. After the presentation, Keisha found a quiet corner where she could finally breathe. The attention still felt surreal. The scholarship, the foundation work, the media interviews. Sometimes she woke up convinced it was all a dream and she'd be back on that corner selling food. But then she'd touch the acceptance letter in her pocket. Full ride to Cornell for pre-med. And remember it was real. Keisha. She turned to find a young girl, maybe 13, clutching a notebook to her chest. I just wanted to say thank you, the girl whispered. I'm in 8th grade. I want to be a doctor, but my guidance counselor said I should think about something more realistic. That medical school is too expensive, too hard for someone like me. Tears welled in her eyes. But hearing your story, you made me believe I could do it anyway. Keisha felt her own throat tighten. She knelt down to the girl's eye level. What's your name? Destiny. Destiny, listen to me. Your guidance counselor is wrong. Not because medical school isn't hard or expensive. It is, but because someone like you is exactly who medicine needs. Promise me you won't give up. Destiny nodded, tears streaming down her face. I promise. As the girl walked away, Keisha felt Victoria's hand on her shoulder. That was you once, Victoria said softly, Isabel balanced on her hip. Someone who almost gave up because the world told her she didn't belong. Yeah, Keisha agreed, but I didn't give up. And because I didn't, Isabel is here. She reached out and touched the baby's tiny hand. Isabel grabbed her finger, holding tight with that impossibly strong grip that babies have. She's perfect, Keisha whispered. Because of you, Victoria said. Keisha, I know you don't like when we try to thank you, but I need you to understand something. You didn't just save my daughter. You saved me. You taught me that I've been living in an echo chamber where only certain voices mattered. You cracked my world open. Marcus joined them, and for a moment they all stood together, this unlikely family forged by crisis and courage. I've been thinking, Marcus said, about what your father told you, that your worth isn't in what you own, but in who you help. Yeah, Keisha said. I spent 40 years believing the opposite, building wealth, accumulating power, thinking that's what made me valuable. He looked at his daughter, then at Keisha. Your father, who made $30,000 a year, was richer than I've ever been, because he raised you, and you saved my daughter. That's worth more than $43 billion. 3 years later, Keisha Williams stood in Cornell's medical school auditorium, accepting the humanitarian award for her work with the Isabel Grace Foundation, which now served 500 students across 12 cities. She'd just finished her undergraduate degree with highest honors. Medical school started in the fall. But more than that, 3 babies have been saved this year because nurses and orderlies and janitors spoke up when they noticed something wrong, and doctors actually listened. The Williams Protocol was now standard training in over 200 hospitals. I want to end with this, Keisha said into the microphone, her voice carrying across the crowded room. I was invisible. Most of you were invisible. But invisible doesn't mean powerless. The next time you see something wrong, the next time you have an answer but think nobody will listen, speak anyway. Because truth doesn't require credentials. It just requires courage. The room erupted in applause. In the front row, Isabel Ashford, now 3 years old, healthy and bright, sat on her mother's lap, clapping with everyone else, not understanding that she was alive because someone refused to be silent. The moral: true wisdom has no price tag. The most important voice in the room might belong to someone the world has trained you to ignore. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's speaking truth even when you're terrified. And sometimes, the greatest act of rebellion is refusing to stay invisible when someone needs you to be seen. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that your voice matters, I need you to do something right now. Subscribe to Billionaire Dawn Stories, because every week we bring you true stories about underdogs, courage, and the moment when everything changes. We tell the stories that prove wealth isn't measured in dollars, that brilliance lives in unexpected places, that one brave voice can save a life. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Because next week's story will blow your mind. It's about a homeless veteran who walked into a corporate boardroom and exposed a secret that a CEO tried to hide. You don't want to miss it. Comment below. Have you ever spoken up when everyone told you to stay quiet? Tell us your story. You might just inspire someone else to find their voice. Remember, you don't need permission to be brilliant. You just need courage. Subscribe to Billionaire Dawn Stories, because every voice matters, including yours.